Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got a new one for you, r/NeighborsFromHell. I previously found myself going out of my way to hunt down stories and other subreddits about neighbors doing some pretty goofy things, and when I discovered there was an entire subreddit dedicated to that, oh boy, here we go. Euphoric Grab 9861. Neighbor thinks I breed rats in my greenhouse. What would you do? Vent/rant. I've lived in the house I own with my husband for 12 years. It's a terrace built in the 1860s with lots of things like coal chutes and cellars that undercut other people's properties. We live near farmland, and we were told when we bought it that rats were in the area and to keep a good supply of rat wire to keep them out. There has never been any sign that there have been rats in our house, but we know others have had problems. Okay, on to the weirdness. My neighbor and I were on decent terms until he decided not to be and called the council on us for having a compost bin. He called the water company for something found to be his fault. They ruined my 40th birthday by constantly calling around. And he tried to call the police because I laughed at another neighbor calling him a bellend. He threw a fit when we decided we would no longer communicate with him unless absolutely necessary. So, he started claiming to anyone who would listen that I trap and breed rats in my greenhouse. He loudly told an exterminator he called after seeing one whole rat in my garden this, and I was amused and appalled. I found out when having a casual chat with another neighbor at the bus stop that he's been making these claims for over a year and then heard it again from the man himself telling someone this. Not once has he mentioned it to us, and he will use any excuse to try to get us to talk to him. The exterminator was adamant that if I was breeding and keeping rats in a 3x2 meter greenhouse, then the smell and noise would be unbearable. But the neighbor is undeterred from his delusion. His partner has been in my greenhouse when I showed her my tomato plants and asked if she wanted the excess crop. So she's been trying to also tell him that he's delusional too. We've installed cameras in case he tries to take matters into his own hands to prove I'm the rat queen, and have been loudly talking about how ridiculous this situation is in his earshot. We know he has issues and has fixated on me as a malign force, another reason for the cameras. We're compiling a spreadsheet of his odd and harassing behavior over the years. I know I'm not breeding rats and do not fear anything he tries to do, but wanted to tell internet strangers to get it off my chest and in the hope that someone will find it amusing. Honestly, just get like 100 rat plushies from Amazon and just fill your greenhouse with them. And then just take photos and spread them in the neighborhood. It's like, I'm the rat queen. Ooh. I don't really know what else you can do because it sounds like pretty much everyone is on your side, but this guy definitely has something going on and ooh. But yeah, definitely keep the spreadsheet going and doing what you can to maintain a thoroughly detailed list of all his weird and odd behaviors, so that way if something does come from his shenanigans, you have enough to keep yourself in the clear. Good luck, Rat Queen. Taylorville. Whole neighborhood is being tormented by one family. What would you do? Vent/rant. About 12-ish years ago, a new family moved in 2 doors down from us with a little boy. They seemed nice enough at first, and they kept to themselves most of the time. The son was very sweet and liked to come over to talk when I was younger. The dad was a loudmouth, but he didn't really cause any problems, and our other neighbors agreed that overall, they seemed like a nice family. They had another son. The boys grew up, and now they've become the worst people imaginable. Some examples over the last few years. The kids learned racial slurs from their father very young and started screaming them at any non-white passing person who happened to be outside at the same time as them. The family stocks up on M80s every year and fires them off at all hours of the day, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes at night without warning. They also let the children light them themselves. They almost blew up a car once. The parents bought their sons 4-wheelers for Christmas one year and they drive them full speed around the neighborhood. We live in the suburbs across the street from a school, so many almost accidents have happened. They don't stop at stop signs or pay attention to cars on the road. Everyone in the neighborhood hates them. As a note, 4-wheelers are required to follow the rules of the road because if cyclists, skateboarders, and technically everyone on some kind of form of wheeled transportation is required to, a 4-wheeler most certainly is. When the 4-wheelers aren't enough, they got dirt bikes. They rev them as loud as they can for hours to the point where things hanging on our walls shake. And of course, they drive them around in the street as well. The father installed a trucker horn on his truck and likes to honk it to signal his buddy across the street so they can yell, to each other from the opposite sides of the road. They also get into honking wars and go back and forth until someone screams at them to stop. The horns are as loud as the horns they played during the NHL games when someone scores a goal. If there's an outdoor party somewhere on our street, the kids will circle around the street on their bikes and try to spit at people from a distance. Recently, I, 23 female, had to stop going on runs outside because the father and his friend across the street started waiting for me to return home so they could throw poppers and firecrackers on the ground as I passed by to scare me. A teenage boy that's assault, by the way. A teenage boy that lived in our street brought his friend home from school, and while walking to his house, the friend, who was black, stepped on crazy neighbor's lawn. The dad freaked out on him and called the cops because he was acting suspicious. The dad finds it funny to throw firecrackers at his own children sometimes. I've watched this happen while one of the boys was trying to cut the grass. About an hour ago, another honking war started. I had a really bad day and my head was pounding and they just won't stop. I opened my window and screamed at them to knock it off. The neighborhood has been silent ever since, but I know they'll retaliate in a few days. I really regret doing it in hindsight, but it's the only thing that gets them to stop. Naturally, nobody else in our neighborhood likes them. Our neighbors have called the cops on them numerous times, but they take too long to get there, and by the time the cop car rolls around, they've gone inside or left for the day. Yelling at them anonymously usually gets them to stop for a few days, but it always starts up again later. One time, a cop car even parked on our street and stayed there for a while, but of course the family decided not to go outside that day. Every year they get worse, and I don't think they'll be moving anytime soon. How can we get them to stop? We're desperate at this point. Edit, I removed the part talking about politics because it's starting to derail the conversation away from the advice, which is why I posted in the first place. Thank you for the helpful comments though. I'll be buying cameras and creating a paper trail for evidence, as well as speaking with my other neighbors. CPS is on my radar the next time something dangerous happens. It sounds like the advice that was given in the comments is roughly exactly what I would have said. Contact your neighbors, get their phone numbers, and have everyone around that is sick and tired of this bullshit get some kind of camera. Nowadays, you can buy a very easy quick mount camera and put it somewhere where it can't be easily seen for probably less than $50. Hook it up to your phone and just make sure you're recording whenever some bullshit begins happening. Get a good long list of paper trail and then file a complaint. But the complaint has to be done as a group. It can't be one individual person. As long as the neighborhood is acting together and there's enough overwhelming evidence for every person, it is a lot of additional stuff that's going to be tacked on. You really got to make sure though that you're going from this as a group, because if it's just one person, it'll be a lot easier for them to single you out and retaliate and make your life even more of a living hell than it already is. So be careful about that, and it's best to work with your neighbors on trying to gather evidence and to shut them up for good. Adept Fox, neighbor turning our power off. Vent/rant. So my girlfriend and I live in a duplex, new construction. New electrical code requires an outside disconnect at the meter box. What? Why? So, to paint the picture on the neighbor's side of the house, there's a dual meter panel and a disconnect, a 100 amp breaker, for each apartment. Well, Friday my girlfriend gets home, she calls me at work and says the power is off. I say, okay, I'll be home in a few to come check it out. And in the meantime, one of our other neighbors goes over and sees our breaker is off and flips it back on. Okay, no big deal. I ask this neighbor if it was tripped or if it was off. He says, yeah, well, I'm not really sure, I think it was off, but he doesn't really know much. Next day, we're headed home and I get a notification that my dog's smart collar base is offline. Okay, sounds like the power is off again. So we get home, it's late at night at this point, and I walk over to the breaker and find that it's off. Not tripped, off. Only way that is going to happen is if someone physically turned it off. So I turn it back on and put a padlock on the door. Now, this isn't a high traffic area where the meter panel is located. The only people that are ever in the area is this exact neighbor and his family. 5 minutes later, the neighbor comes knocking on our door. Hey, what are you doing over my property? For one, it's not his property, obviously. Oh yeah, our power was turned off and I turned it back on. Oh yeah, there's been some power issues here recently that must have caused it. No, it was off, not tripped. It was physically turned off by a person. No other possibility. At this point, the guy flips his lid. Mind you, I didn't explicitly say I think it was him who tampered with it. Starts screaming. So I just shut the door. Cops show up about 10 minutes later. Turned out this same neighbor called the cops. He starts screaming at the cops, the ones that he called, and demands I get arrested for trespassing. Cops come and talk to me, basically saying, yeah, this guy's a dipshit, we deal with him a lot, you should try to get a restraining order. While all this is happening, an ambulance shows up. Turned out the guy's wife is having a panic attack, and they take her to the hospital. Cops end up leaving, nothing happens, and we can hear him arguing with his family for the next couple hours. Just another insane event with this particular neighbor. There are plenty more. OP actually added a quick little addition in the comments. Side note, girlfriend has a suspicion he's stealing our power, which I admit would be incredibly easy to do with the way the meter panel is set up. She noticed our power usage was higher than usual yesterday, and in 1 hour, we used more power than we have ever used in a single day. Landlord will be here tomorrow to investigate. Below OP, Cardinal29 comments, if the landlord isn't willing to secure the panel with a lock and install cameras, go over his head. Monday morning, call the utility company and explain the situation. You're entitled to a secure panel, a secure meter, and uninterrupted service. An outside switch may be for emergency services, but there's probably a universal key like firemen have for elevators. Yeah, having an unsecured main breaker to your entire house is never a good idea, because I could definitely see some teenager wanting to do some fucked up form of ding-dong ditching and essentially just pulling the power main and running. So yeah, that should definitely be secured. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Also, if a cop is recommending you get a restraining order, you should definitely do so. See if you can get into contact with the police officer that showed up that night, and honestly, they might be able to help you with the process starting it, and getting an officer to kind of sign off on it and provide the police report if there was one helps it get in front of a judge a lot faster to get it approved and or confirmed. XXOOXXXOOXX. Neighbor has gone nuts since having our shared property line surveyed, revealing she actually has about 5 feet less than she thought. I find the whole thing hilarious. Thankfully, they're using words this time, because last time we had a signifier between feet and inches, my dyslexia decided to throttle me in the backyard, and I read 20 feet as 20 inches, give or take. Anyways, this is a venter rant post. My, 39 female, and my husband, 49 male. Also, side tangent, when it's structured like this where it says my, then age and gender, does anyone else think they're saying their husband is a 39 female? Just curiosity, because I think that all the time and it catches me off guard. Anyways, moved into this house in 2018. The neighbor in question technically lives on the cross street to ours, but our driveway is adjacent to her backyard. When we moved in, we were under the impression that the property extended about 3 to 4 feet-ish beyond the edge of our driveway, which was fine. We've used this as a guide to where we mow that strip of lawn. Generally, we would mow 2.5 to 3 mower widths, and it was never an issue. This lady is in her 60s or 70s, I'm not really sure. Like I said, never had a problem at all. I had a few brief conversations with her, and the same with my husband and hers, during the first couple of years we lived here. Not really even enough to consider them acquaintances, but enough to be civil and give the occasional wave. Her husband passed away in 2020 or 21. I really can't remember. I don't know if it was COVID related or not, but he had health issues beforehand, so I'm not sure. Since then, she's hired a lawn care service to mow, leaf blow, etc. At the time, my husband worked second shift, so we would sleep in a bit, most days till 10 or so. Our bedroom is adjacent to our driveway, and the way the room is, the only way for us to put a bed is with the head along that wall. But that wall has 2 huge windows. It's an older house and the windows are pretty thin. We started getting woken up at 7 a.m. weekly to a lawnmower and leaf blower directly outside our window. Finally, my husband checked it out and found the lawn boy driving his riding lawnmower up and down our driveway to access her yard and standing in our driveway to blow leaves. This would literally be less than 10 feet from our heads as we slept. He had enough and went out and got the guy's attention and told him, look, this is my driveway, it's not a thoroughfare, for her yard because it's convenient. The kid, I don't know, early 20s-ish, apologized. But this lady has had it out for us ever since. Now, about a year later, my teenager was raking leaves to the apron of the yard because our town comes along and sucks them up every year. He was putting them on our side and she came out and yelled at him, saying they were on her lawn. He said he thought our property was from the telephone pole over. She said it wasn't. Whatever. Maybe a month later, I was returning from the store and saw she was trying to pick up sticks in her yard. The way she moves makes it clear she has back issues. Like she can't bend, she had to crouch and reach. I asked her from my driveway, Miss So-and-so, do you want some help? No answer. Maybe she didn't hear me. Louder. Miss So-and-so. She didn't turn around, just now, with an attitude. Fine. I went inside and figured she was just still salty with the whole lawn boy situation. A few months ago, my husband was hosing out our trash can and dumped the water along the edge of the street on our strip of land. The street has storm gutters because we get a lot of rain. She had a fit about it and came out to yell at him. He told her he isn't some kid she can yell at and leave him alone. Within a week, she hired a guy to survey the land. Come to find out, her land ends on just the opposite side of the telephone pole, which gives her like 5-ish feet less. She's all butthurt about it, but whatever. So about a week or so later, it's evening and I'm packing up the car for my husband to go to work, as he's on nights now, and I just kind of glance in the direction of her house as I start the car and see her and some guy standing at the window just fucking staring at me. I'm literally doing the same thing I do every night when I pack up the car. I don't know what the deal was. So I come inside and say and tell my husband, these people are just standing there being creepy and it's unnerving. He goes out to put something in the car and this guy comes out of her house and goes off about how we're harassing her and all that. My husband tells this guy, back off, I'm just trying to get ready for work. So the police get called and it's a whole dumb thing. Her and this guy get trespassed for our property and my husband gets trespassed for her property. I had stayed inside during the whole police talk, so I didn't get anything. She's literally crying to the cop that we have cameras looking into her windows. We have security cameras for the same reasons that most people do, in case something happens. Like, we give a fuck about what's going on in her place, LOL. The officer told her we can have 100 cameras if we want. Last week, she had the city survey. They put little flags where the gas line or whatever is, so we assume she's gonna build a fence. Then she cuts down this huge bush in her yard, that's always been there. So again, we're getting excited she's gonna build a fence. Monday morning at 6 a.m., she's standing at her window watching me put our garbage can to the curb. Today, her daughter comes and puts up a security camera pointing into our garage area and backyard, which she couldn't even see until they cut the bush down. We're cracking up. It's freaking hilarious. So of course my husband now intends to get 3 more cameras for that side of the house to freak her out even more. Careful with that one. I don't know. Maybe we're being petty assholes. I think it's mostly funny, especially since it all started by us not wanting people in our driveway. Edit. I think I fixed my formatting issue. Edit for info. For those mentioning a potential for dementia, I really don't know. I haven't spoken to her in a couple years. However, her daughters, she has 2 I think, are there for several hours every day. Either one or both of them. If there's a concern of dementia and or delusion, they need to seek some kind of treatment for her. Also, a couple of months before her husband passed, she approached me while I was outside doing something to gossip about her new next-door neighbor. This new neighbor's backyard is adjacent to the rest of our driveway. During this conversation, I mentioned the property line because I was under the impression it was a few feet or so, as I mentioned before. Her response was, "We've lived here for years. I don't know where the property line is and I don't really care." Update. She had a fence built. My husband was out cleaning leaves off the car in the evening after the construction was finished. This is not unusual. He always clears the leaves off the car while getting ready to leave for work. Well, out she came. I couldn't see her as I was on our back patio, but she was screaming like a fucking lunatic. "Stay away from that fence!" and "Get away from that fence!" And my personal favorite, "Leave that fence alone, you son of a bitch!" We're happy she built a fence. He wasn't touching it, and what the fuck does she think he's gonna do, knock the damn thing over? We have zero intention of vandalizing her fence or property. I find it super silly and even unhinged that she put up a fence, which, in my mind, says, "This is my side and that is yours," but then proceeds to scream at him for being on our side. He didn't even hear her, and when I told him, he didn't say anything back because he didn't want to give her a reason to call the cops or whatever. So that's that for now. We'll see what, if anything, happens next. So definitely be careful because she could be trying to lay the grounds for some sort of civil protection order or restraining order. You'd be surprised how often neighbors can get those against each other and really just fuck things up and misconstrue the facts of what's happening because they have security cameras taking some out of context footage. Bada bing, bada boom, go to a judge that's sympathetic, and suddenly you now have a civil protection order being served to you on your doorstep because they have kind of misconstrued the events of what's been going on. So please just be careful with that. That shit does happen. It might be worth trying to contact the daughters and just have a conversation with them to try to broker some peace, or even hell, write her a letter. Something along those lines where you can let her know that you don't want to cause any problems, you're not there to cause her any harm, because chances are, with her old age, she might be paranoid that you guys want to hurt her. My only recommendation would be to take steps to make sure that you're not going to get hit with a CPO. That's my biggest thing here. Also, when it comes to cameras, do be careful because we had an incident with a neighbor a few years back where they had cameras facing into people's windows and they had a court order to not only have the cameras positioned at a specific angle, but to also, at any request, provide verification and confirmation the cameras are not facing into the windows. I don't know the specifics of it because this was told to me by one of my neighbors and this was a while back, but do be careful about that. There is some new precedent being set with cameras and home security systems. Kanga Khan got called to Karen for asking neighbors not to use our driveway. Vent/rant. We bought our single-family home 6 months ago. After years of dealing with neighbors from hell and other random neighborhood happenings, I thought surely things would calm down. I knew there would be new challenges, but I think I've just finally reached the boss level. Neighbors across the street have been insufferable this whole time. Bumping music, rattling our walls, people constantly coming and going, revving motorcycles, shooting fireworks off that land in our yard/on our house. They have 8 to 10 people living there with a car for each person, so that means more spaces are taken on the street every day, which is fine. We have 2 cars and don't need a ton of street parking anyway. But they love to use our driveway multiple times per day when backing in or out and turning around. Most of the time, this wouldn't bother me, but they started pulling halfway up to our garage, getting out of their car and rummaging around in it for who knows what. I finally had enough of it today and asked them to stop pulling in our driveway for their own personal use. So I got called a Karen for that. This is on top of multiple other issues we've had with them that could have their own post many paragraphs long. I'm hardcore mourning our first-time home buyers experience. This was supposed to be a happy, fun, exciting time in our lives, but it's just turned into something driving a wedge between us and ruining our mental health. I'm honestly at a loss, and we're already thinking of selling, but don't want to lose money on this. Edit. This is the day after I was called a Karen and another one of their occupants decided to back his car up into our driveway, but leave it on the sidewalk area so it's technically not on our property. He just sat in there for a few minutes blocking us from getting out. Edit 2. I appreciate all the responses and kind words. Thank you for everyone. For the people saying caltrops or spike strips, I don't actually think that's legal. It might be considered booby trapping if I'm not careful. We are planning to save up and get the front yard fenced in, completed with a driveway gate, in the spring, and yes, we already have 2 exterior cameras. Edit 3. We've come to the series finale, y'all. The main perpetrator and his girlfriend got into another big blowout argument today, and he's getting kicked out. Thanks for all the love, we'll return for season 4 in a few months. So the main focus that I kind of want to look at is the person that's blocking your driveway in. Get photographs of that, because you can actually, even if they move before a tow truck or an officer shows up, usually report that to some kind of internal system that you can use to report parking violations to the city officials. The only reason why I know this is because once upon a time I had a landscape company park their entire fucking truck fleet in front of my driveway and I couldn't get out, and I had contacted someone in the neighborhood about what I could do about it, and they directed me towards a local service the city had set up that allows me to take photos and report parking violations as long as I provide ample evidence. So I did. And this whole story fiasco, by the way, is just beyond them parking in front of my driveway and me instantly jumping to reporting them. They had been doing this for weeks, and I had tried talking to them multiple times not to block my driveway, and the guy pretty much told me, "You don't know how to run a business, I do, this is just part of the trade," and then walked off. When I continually tried to do this and tried to essentially push the fact that like, hey, you're blocking my driveway, I can't get out of my home, they were continually dismissive. I left a 1-star review with photographs of what had happened. Then they came to my door with like 3 of them pretty much yelling at me to change it to a 5-star review or else. So that's when I reported them for parking violations. Any Historian 7528. Neighbor called the cops because she stole our trash can. Vent/rant. Last week I set my trash out and when I went to grab the can, it was in my neighbor's spot. I noticed that she had written her house number all over the can. I moved it back in front of my house and forgot about it. Well, yesterday, she came over, grabbed the can, and told me via Ring camera that she was going to call the police. I told her that she didn't have to do that and my fiancé was on the way home. I also told her that last week we both had 1 trash can, and now she has 2. So make it make sense. My fiancé talked to her and she verbally attacked him and told him she would get him deported. She also claimed to know his boss and said that his boss hates him. She put the trash can in her house with the trash inside of it. She put the trash can in her house with the trash inside of it. Okay. The police ended up coming and they spoke with us. They said she's mentally ill and they could not do anything. They recommended we get another trash can and write our house number on it. We contacted our landlord about the situation and he told us to leave her alone. This has been so frustrating. And it's not like those neighborhood trash cans are cheap either. I've previously had to replace them, and those things can run up to $80 a piece, at least for my local trash company. Thankfully, the one time I did have to replace it, it was the trash company's fault because they threw my entire trash can away. Thank God for the doorbell camera. Apparently, too, I wasn't the only house that had that problem because in that specific day, there were probably almost 10 to 20 houses that all had their trash cans tossed. So the little mechanical arm that would grab the can wasn't really doing that well, and would just fucking yeet the entire trash can into the back of the truck without any remorse. But honestly, unfortunately, as this stands, if she's harboring the stolen trash can in her home and, the cops can't necessarily get a warrant to search the house over an $80 trash can, that'd be a lot of wasted resources for them, so they're not gonna fucking bother. So, yeah, take the L, buy a new trash can, cover it in your house numbers and call it good. That's unfortunately what you're probably gonna have to do. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.